pull away from it that slick sales, yucky feeling that I think a lot of people associate with selling and bring some fun back into it, because you're in business to try to help others have a better life. So why not enjoy the conversations when it comes to deciding if you should work together?
You're listening to The Successful Bookkeeper with your host, Michael Palmer. Listen each week as inspiring guests share their secrets of success to help you increase your confidence, work smarter, and build a business you love. This episode of The Successful Bookkeeper is brought to you by PureBookkeeping.com, the proven system to grow your bookkeeping business.
Welcome back to the Successful Bookkeeper Podcast. I am your host, Michael Palmer, and today's show is going to be a good one. Our guest is the Director of Coaching for the Win Without Pitching Business Development Training Program that provides sales training for creative entrepreneurs. Shannyn Lee, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Michael. I'm really happy to be here. Looking forward to our conversation.
It's an exciting conversation. And, just the name of what you do, Win Without Pitching. I mean, I think our listeners are already relaxing right now and thinking, okay, I like the sound of that. And so before we get into what that's all about, tell us a little bit about you and your career journey leading up to this point.
Sure. This is always a fun question to answer because it takes me back to when I was a little girl and I wanted to be a horse trainer, and now I'm a sales training coach. So how do you get from there to here? But for me, I think it was a journey of learning that I really liked communicating with people. I really liked being kind of out there front and center and helping somehow. And as I progressed through school, I had a degree in business and in Spanish, and I was involved in some international exchange. I lived in Argentina for a while. I thought I maybe wanted to be an ambassador to a foreign country, and all of these kind of experiences and journeys led me to the field of communications. And so when I started my career, I started on what I would say is the client side, working in corporate America for companies like AT&T Wireless and Safeco Insurance, and I was in public relations and investor relations and corporate communications roles. And while I wouldn't trade that because it was great experience, I also learned about myself that I liked a smaller organization where I could really feel the direct impact of the value I could bring. And so I ended up shifting over to a sales role for a design firm in Seattle, a graphic design firm in Seattle. They had been a client of mine when I was on the corporate side. And they asked me to join in a sales and marketing capacity. And I didn't really know what that was, but I've always been a bit fearless. And I thought, I'm going to try it. And I ended up really finding my unique ability in business development or selling within the creative services space. And along the way, I met Blair Enns, who's the founder of Win Without Pitching, where I work now. And he took me through his approach to selling when I was at that design firm in Seattle. And I really fell in love with it. It really made a lot of sense to me. And about 5 or 6 years ago, he asked me to come on board as a coach and help our clients feel more comfortable selling and gain their confidence and understand a framework to make it easier. So it was an interesting journey, but I feel like I'm really working within my unique ability right now, and I just love it.
So interesting. This concept, that we never know what the experiences that we're having today are going to enable in the future, the things we can do and where it will take us. So your journey certainly sounds like it's been very much about that. When it comes to the work that you do today, I mean, there must have been perhaps obstacles that you would have had to face in yourself along that journey. What were some of those?
Yeah, I think that the biggest obstacle that I faced was probably just recognizing that it's okay to fail, because I did have some failures, I would say, on the corporate side of the equation. And The failure really came from gaining a deeper understanding of where I belonged and what I had to offer, and knowing that was good enough, and that it didn't necessarily need to be sitting in a big organization that was complex and kind of filled with politics. And it was okay that I wasn't good at that part of it. And it was okay that I found a smaller experience that maybe didn't have the big corporate brand name tied to it, but that allowed me to go more deeply into a skill set where I could really shine and just find myself again, I would say. So it was the ability to fail and build confidence and get up again and try something else.
It's so interesting, facing failure, but it's this almost like a mindfulness of observing it and not letting it consume, and changing the dialogue around what it is. And I'd imagine some of that is the work you do for people who are trying to figure out how to get people to pick them and choose them. And in the world of business, we call it selling. But essentially, it's like, hey, we're lining up, and who's going to pick me to be on their team? Many people, many of our listeners, and our listener right now would be thinking, yeah, that's not my thing. I don't like doing it. I'm not very good at it. And I wish someone else could do it for me.
Yeah. Yep. The turning point for me in the game of selling, and we view it as a game. You want to have fun. You want to play the game and enjoy yourself. The turning point for me was watching Blair speak at an event when I was selling for that design agency in Seattle. And he said, "You are not in the business of convincing. You have no business of convincing anyone of anything ever during a sale." And it was just a moment of like, oh my God, he's completely right. And what have I been doing in this like dog and pony show and dance and throwing all these ideas at the potential client and trying to make them happy? That's not what it's about. They're coming to us, they're coming to your audience looking for expertise, looking for help. And so that's what the focus should be. Can I help that client to be? And can we have a conversation? You don't need to be pitching and selling.
That's refreshing.
Yeah.
And you spoke of it at being a game. I mean, when you work with people who start to do when you're coaching someone, this whole concept of a game, some people get that quickly. It's like, it's a game. Oh, let's go play the game. Mm-hmm. Where others, how can you call this a game? It's money. It's my business needs customers, and it's like I don't have that many leads, so I've got to make sure that I convince every single person that I talk to that they got to work with me. I mean, can you call that a game? Do you have any people that would experience it that way? And what's a breakthrough for them to be able to have a context of it being a game?
Yeah, definitely. And and when we say it's a game, you need to have fun with it. It's certainly not to diminish the hard work that it takes to run a business and bring new clients in and keep clients happy. The thing that's important is the mindset and the frame that you bring to it. And sales can come with just a lot of anxiety and cause you to do things that you wouldn't normally do in other areas of your life. And what we want our clients to see is that if you bring a mindset of calm and focus and confidence, and you have a framework that we teach to, it can help you settle down and enjoy selling and really view it as a series of conversations that need to happen to see if there is a good fit, to see if we should keep talking, and pull away from it that slick sales, yucky feeling that I think a lot of people associate with selling, and bring some fun back into it, because you're in business to try to help others have a better life. So why not enjoy the conversations when it comes to deciding if you should work together?
So true. So true. And I think this whole business of convincing, I would say, if I think of my own career in selling and having to do that kind of work, I would say there has been many times along the journey where it was about convincing and it was not fun. Mm-hmm. I would also say that there's a level for me around scarcity of as I mentioned, right? They bookkeepers in this, it's not like they get tons of leads all the time.
Yeah.
Some do. They've done great marketing and figured that out. But if you don't get a lot of leads, you're going to be like, oh, they're precious. I can't lose it, right? So then that combined with, wanting to go well and be chosen, it can be very stressful. With this concept of going in as just helping them, it's simply just something that can be a game and have some fun with it, and it would take that charge of energy, I guess, out of it.
Yeah. So I think that a lot of times people come into those sales conversations feeling that scarcity, feeling like, I got to close this, putting that pressure on themselves. And it can happen for a lot of reasons. It can happen because they need to make payroll. It can happen because they've not had any kind of sales training, right? And it's a skill that you need to learn, that you need help with. It can happen because they don't feel they have the right to be at that table. There's a confidence issue taking place. And a lot of that can be solved through training, but a lot of that also has to do with specialization and really planting your stake in the ground around what kind of focus you want for your bookkeeping business, and making a conscious decision not to try to do all things for all people, but going all in on an area like bookkeeping for creative services or bookkeeping for interior design, and really building a depth of expertise and confidence then that allows you to understand, who am I going to target, be more settled down in a conversation because you're viewed more of as an expert, and release some of that anxiety and stress that comes with selling. So specialization can be a big game changer for people.
So you focus on your own specialty, and that gives you even more focus to be able to help somebody very specifically.
Yeah, it really begins there in our mind. It really begins with how you differentiate yourself. Are you seen as meaningfully different to that client who's looking at you and 3 or 4 other firms? And that helps you to bring power into the sale in a way that's positive. It's using your power for good and being desirable, right? That client needs to have more desire for you than you have for them.
Interesting. Our listener is, as I've said in title of the podcast, The Successful Bookkeeper. They're bookkeepers, and I would say there would be more introverted types. And we don't want to get into a conversation about introvert, extrovert, ambivert. However, they're technicians. They're good at the work they do. That work is about working with numbers, working in putting their mind into figuring out all of the financial aspects of a business. And so when you're working with creative types, they would be slightly different. How do you see the work you do working? Does it, would it be different? Would they need to approach it differently?
So yes, our area of focus is creative professionals, and that by and large to us means design firms, marketing firms, advertising firms. But we also work with specialized experts outside of that creative services field: architects, interior designers, financial planners, management consultants, because what you're selling by and large is your skill set. It's not as much a product as it is a service, and your deep expertise in this area of bookkeeping, for example. And it sometimes is a longer term sales cycle and requires some facilitation at a level that is just more in depth and technical in nature than buying a product. And so what I would say, is that it's not really different than when I'm working with a creative services client. They oftentimes are very uncomfortable selling as well. It just is a very vulnerable place for any sort of creator or designer or artist to be. And in most cases, it's because they haven't quite yet understood the mindset that they bring to it, right? We all bring our baggage to things, especially selling. And if you can understand what are your motivators that cause you to kind of behave badly in the sale or do things you wouldn't normally do? Do you have the need to be liked? Do you have the need to win? Are you really competitive? Do you need to be in control? And if you can kind of get in touch with what are those motivators that cause me to have this behavior that doesn't work, or that positions me as kind of a vendor instead of an expert, and release that and then help yourself out by learning a sales framework so that you're not repeating every conversation as if it was the first sales conversation you've had. You give yourself the ability to follow a framework that brings confidence and organization to the sale. That oftentimes really helps an introvert start to get more comfortable and also understand that it's okay to be in that mode of letting the client to be talk more in the beginning, because your job is to ask a lot of questions to see what's going on for them, to see what is this desired future state they're hoping to achieve, and to really suss out, hey, am I the best fit for you? Am I going to be the best bookkeeper to get you to where you need to go? And if not, that's okay, but let's have this conversation and get to know each other a little better. And if it can be approached with some of those concepts and ideas in mind, it really helps people to settle in a bit better.
So interesting. I mean, that in itself is really mindfulness around it that alters their context as well about selling. You've in some of your language online and in some of the titles that you've mentioned already, you talk about money and being comfortable about talking about money, and this is a big one. I'd
Yeah.
love to hear more about that, because that I would say that's if we think of what's going to happen for our listener right now, they're going to be in a sales conversation. They're not going to want to have that conversation. We've given them some tips and tools to take the charge out of that. And this is a game. It's about helping. Have fun with it. You're there to help. And I love how you said deep expertise in bookkeeping. I love that. Deep expertise in bookkeeping. And you're going to bring the 20 years or 10 years or 5 years, whatever it is, of your deep expertise in bookkeeping to help these people. And the benefit for them is incredible, right? If you help, great bookkeeper has the ability to really create great wealth for entrepreneurs in their business. And so, it's like life-altering skill set. So that's like, wow, this is actually, I'm getting excited about this conversation. But now it's like, we've talked, we've done this, and now we got to talk about the money. It's going to cost you something here. It's not free. And
Right.
I'd say that's another big one for people. How do we deal with that?
Yeah. Well, so part of what makes you successful in this area of being able to sell with more confidence is practice. So I'm not going to say this is going to happen overnight, because it takes a lot of repetitions and it takes kind of fumbling and failing forward into things and being okay with some of the messiness that can happen during sales conversations as you sort stuff out. So just, I think, understand first that this takes practice, and with practice, confidence builds. And it does become more fun and it does become easier. So that said, when it comes to the money conversation, what I think is really important is to be first and foremost clear with what you're selling to that client. What are the options that you can put in front of a client that make it easy for them to buy from you, that make it transparent and feel like you're working from a place of integrity when it comes to pricing, right? And it may be that you price each engagement based on the value you can bring for that client. It may be that you have different packages that you can offer so that you're ready to go and you can kind of quickly and clearly talk about money with confidence, because after learning more about their needs, you have the ability to say, okay, let's jump into the investment that you should be prepared to make if you want to work together. And that's one phrase right there that I like, instead of what budget do you have, right? I like to think of the work that you're doing as a bookkeeper as an investment that client is going to make in their business when they engage with you. So if you can think about that kind of language, I think that's helpful as well. So Mr. Client, what kind of investment are you looking to make in hiring a bookkeeper to take care of this area of the business for you this year? And the goal after you say a phrase like that is to stop talking and embrace silence and just give that person the chance to respond. And you may hear, well, I don't know what it costs. You tell me. Okay, that's fine. Then think about a range. Think about offering up, well, I'll probably need to dig in a little more and get more detail, but on the high end of the range, work like this for clients like you can look like 50,000 a year. On the low end, it may look like 10,000 a year. Does that range feel comfortable? Right? So even just trying to identify, are we on the same page through floating a range is a great test to see, okay, should we keep talking? And I also have clients who recognize, like, yeah, money is hard to talk about. And they'll just frankly say that in the sales conversation. They will just be themselves and say, okay, we've come to that point in the conversation where we need to talk about money and the investment you probably need to make to hire me. This is always a point in the conversation that makes me a little nervous, but let's get it out on the table and see if we're on the same page, right? Just be honest about how it makes you feel. You're not always going to do that going forward because you're going to build some confidence along the way. But I think if you can let yourself off the hook a little bit and just acknowledge some parts of these conversations are a little uncomfortable. I get it, but we need to talk about it because we need to understand if we're a fit to work together. Those are some helpful things to think through.
Beautiful. It's so powerful. So many great nuggets there that can not only give them exactly what they can say, you've given them scripts to say and lines to say, which I think is so generous. And I can feel already that there's great structure here to have this conversation, a new conversation, an easier conversation, a more light conversation. And what comes up for me is, if I think about next challenge that we're going to face here when we're talking about money, and I would say that this is probably one that you've got all along the gamut, is because they're charging their services, it's their intelligence, their experience, their knowledge, whatever we want to call that, whether you're creative selling art or design, it's like the human element of am I worth it? Am I charging what I'm worth? And I would say most listeners, sorry listener, are undercharging their services and what they do based on what results they create in the world. So have you come across that? How do you deal with it?
Yeah, it's such a good question and such a true pattern that we see, undercharging, and I think that one of the things that we really have gone deep into over the last 2 or 3 years is the idea of value-based pricing. So value-based pricing sees you charging for the outcomes and the value that you're going to carve out for your client, opposite than charging for time and materials, cost-based pricing. This is kind of a big and deep concept, but I think the idea is to be able to guide that prospect through a conversation that first asks them, what is your desired future state? You and I are sitting down 3 years from today, and you're really happy. What's happened in those 3 years to make you so happy? Get a sense of what the vision is, what the want is beyond the need. If you can open a conversation with a question like that and get that person looking into the future, it sets you up to be viewed as more strategic out of the gate. It sets you up to understand where you might potentially be able to take the work you can do for this client to help them achieve that vision. And it allows that client to just really think big and dream big differently than they may have before in a conversation like this. So that's step one of starting to figure out, how do you feel more confident charging for the value that you're worth? And I'll just pause there because there are some other components to the value conversation, but I'll just pause there for a second so I don't go on too long to see if there's a follow-on question about that, Michael.
Well, it's very, very relevant and timely. I mean, it's been timely and relevant, this conversation of value pricing, literally for 5 years to,
right.
Let's call it 7 years, I would say, is when the conversation, and there's many thought leaders in our industry that talk about value pricing, fixed pricing, and improving pricing. But I like this frame and the way you're presenting it in terms of just simply, we're not going to go too deep in it, but yeah, it's like, what do they value? What's the outcome they're looking for? And if we think about this in a very simple, let's take it to art. I mean, it's paint on a piece of canvas, right? Like there's some that you could literally look at it and go, well, I wouldn't pay $1 for that. And
Right.
some people would pay $1 million for that same piece. So it's like, beauty is the eye of the beholder, and that's our job to figure out what is the beauty that this person on the other end of our conversation, what beauty are they looking for, and what price do they put on that beauty? They might think it's beautiful, but for them it's $1 painting, and for someone who sees that beauty and the rareness of that beauty, understands the value of that beauty. And I often say, when people, like when we're talking about this whole concept of valuing something, if people haven't experienced the pain or the challenge of not having what we have to offer, their value conversation will be very different than someone who's gone through challenges and understands, like, you know what, I don't ever want to go through that again.
Right.
If bookkeeping's been done poorly or not at all, or in a way that's not right, doesn't give you what you need, it can ruin a business. If you're talking to an entrepreneur who ruined their business because they didn't get someone to handle that, their conversation around value is going to be very different. So we also have to understand where they are in that conversation. So I love the way you've put it. It's just so simple, right? We think about it, value, what's the outcome they're looking for? And that particular outcome, what do they value that outcome?
Yeah, and you're so right that it's subjective. It's going to be different for everybody. But what that question sets you up to do is then much more easily explore what are the obstacles we need to overcome to help you get to that vision. And then you're going to learn things like, well, I don't know if I can afford you, or I had a bad experience with a bookkeeper in the past, so I'm gun shy here, right? It's going to reveal a lot of things that then you can either overcome or maybe not overcome to decide if you are the right fit. It then sets you up to tell some stories, just like you were saying, right? Here's the risk you're exposing yourself to if you don't have an expert helping you with this area. Here are some good outcomes I have provided for clients that might reassure you you're talking to somebody that you would be in good hands with. So it just sets you up in a way that really puts you in the driver's seat and provides a lot of reassurance to that person on the other end of the phone or the Zoom or, the table when we get back to having in-person meetings. You then can begin to talk about metrics and how might we measure success, which is you reassuring that you're the expert here and you're willing to put some skin in the game as well.
And that conversation really, as you navigate all those different points of information and exploratory conversation, it also builds trust, growing trust, right? Understanding, this is where I'm going to get something. Oh yeah, I do really want that. And really it's getting to, what do they really want? What does an entrepreneur, what does the business owner on the other end of the table really want? Well, it likely comes around their own personal success, their, success of their business, the ability to pay their staff and, build wealth inside their business and certainty and all those good things. It's like, and bookkeepers, I mean, they have an access to actually be able to turn the dial on all of that with better information and advisory services. And the more you talk about that, the more you explore that, they're going to go, gee, I really want this person. I've never had this conversation. And every moment that happens, every moment that little explosion in their brain goes, ka-cling, I like that. I like what they're saying. The value perception's going up, which doesn't necessarily mean the price is going to go up. You might not necessarily charge them more, but they're going to be very satisfied with the price that they pay, whatever that price is, whether it's high, low, whatever. It's going to be the satisfaction, I think, is going to go up, which is going to make them an even better client.
That's right. And all the while, you're having a really smart, strategic, productive conversation about why you're the expert and why you can take care of them. And you're not convincing them, right? You're not hard selling or convincing, which is what we want to stay away from. You're invoking experience and storytelling and having an uber focus on them and their needs And they walk away feeling like, wow, that was very open and transparent, and I trust this person more as a result.
Mm. So wonderful. This has been an absolutely fantastic conversation. I'm so excited to hear from our listener how this has been beneficial to them. And if it does happen overnight, I want you to let us know, because then you can recommend Shannyn to all of your customers and clients, right? And I think there is an overnight opportunity here for everyone to bring just this little journey with you. Do some thinking about it, write it down. There's a real map here in this conversation to help you improve your game in selling and having people choose you in the marketplace. And so that's exciting. And if there's one thing we could work on in our business that would really be a valuable, if you think about the value of working on something like this, it's like a multiplier of 10x, 1,000x in the long term of our business. If we get this right and do it better just a little bit, the impact long term is massive, massive, massive. So that's why I love this conversation. Shannyn, tell us a little bit more about Win Without Pitching and how your firm and what you do might be beneficial to our listener.
Sure, you bet. Yeah, so we offer many different ways that you can engage with us. And the first one that most people take advantage of is this virtual workshop that we run that helps you really understand the 4 conversations that happen in the buyer's journey and build some real skill in each of those conversations to be able to go and put it into practice at your business right away. So we go deep into the qualifying conversation. We go deep into value, into closing, developing a 3-option proposal so that you're putting options on the table so they're not forced to go compare you to others. This is a great way to jump in and really get immersed with some real exercises and try some things out. Most people that attend see an immediate lift. So this is a great place to jump in. We also offer boot camps and one-to-one coaching. And you can find all of this on our website at winwithoutpitching.com.
Love it. Well, we will obviously have the links to get there. And I hope our listener will go and check out all of those things. And if this is a game that you want to get better at, it sounds like Win Without Pitching is just a perfect fit for our community and our listeners. So thank you, Shannyn, for being on the podcast today. And on behalf of our listeners, thank you for your generosity.
You bet, Michael. Thanks so much for having me. And I just encourage all of you to go out there and be yourself and just have a conversation the next time around.
So true. And with that, we wrap another episode of the Successful Bookkeeper Podcast. To learn more about today's wonderful guest and to get access to all sorts of valuable free business building resources, you can go to thesuccessfulbookkeeper.com. Until next time, goodbye.
You've been listening to The Successful Bookkeeper with Michael Palmer. For more information and to download the resources mentioned in this episode, please visit us at thesuccessfulbookkeeper.com. Thank you for listening.